This is
Chat the Great.
About this coming up tonight, and I was thinking, oh, it's great. I don't have to prepare. I don't have to do anything. Whereas normally I'm thinking, all right, I've got to do my preparation. I want to get things ordered in my mind about what I'm going to ask about, even though it might not necessarily seem that way in some of my interviews. But there is a certain amount of preparation that goes into it, and it's quite refreshing not to have to think about things too much. Which is good. It makes it more relaxing. But at the same time, I could witter on forever, and you get quite kind of self-conscious about talking about yourself and your opinions. And that's one of the interesting things about being an interviewer, is that I can really understand bands and artists' frustration with being interviewed all the time, especially, the bigger the artist, the more constantly they're being interviewed. And they must really get tired of hearing their own voice, and I really feel for them at the same time that, because it's hard, because at the same time, that's part of what they have to do. They didn't realize it when they started playing that guitar, but the part of what they have to do is communicate their ideas and communicate their personality to people, to kind of interest people in what they do. And that's kind of part of the job. There's this kind of salesperson aspect to the job. And that sits better with some people than others. And some people really, really hate that.
Definitely.
Because it is hard sometimes, like bands, especially like the bigger bands, that have been asked everything you can imagine to try and find something that they haven't been asked, because they have to say the same answer all the time. And you do dig, and sometimes you can find that one little gem of piece of information that's fantastic, but it is hard sometimes to find that kind of alternative thing.
It is. Yeah.
And I discover this like right now, because to be honest, like it's also like when you don't have that much experience, John, you're afraid not to put the wrong question, not to, I don't know if it's the case in your case, because we're like so much experience after all those years. But to be honest, I'm afraid not to say something that, you know what I mean, that would like offend you, or, it's really.
Well, I think, Victor, you shouldn't worry too much, because I don't think you're the kind of person who would go around offending people. I don't think that's your your personality. And you just, in many ways, experience gives you the confidence and relaxes you in doing interviews and conducting interviews. And the only way that you can gain that experience is by doing them. I would think that Victor, you're somebody who gives good interview as somebody who's being interviewed, and you've got a good way of talking to people. You're a natural communicator, and that's all you need to do. And in some ways, the interesting thing is that it is important to prepare, but it's also important to be able to think on the spot and talk to people and just respond to what they're saying. And that can lead you into new areas of discussion that they might not have covered before, or that much, because nobody's talked to them about that, because that just happens to be the thing that's going on that day, and that's of interest at that point. And I don't know, in some ways too much store is set by what people say in interviews sometimes, and
definitely.
Sometimes people are just talking off the top of their head. They don't really know what they're talking about, and they're talking utter nonsense.
But I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned also, you were talking about like podcast and interview and being interviewed and interview. Do you follow any podcast? Like, I don't know, Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, or something like that?
I must admit, I don't really. I tend to listen to the radio or listen to music, because I've got an awful lot of music to listen to coming through every week. And so if I'm not listening to that, then I'm dipping into a lot of speech radio, really.